Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is how to draw a leopard's eye using coloured pencils. Before we get into this tutorial, however, if you want to follow this along in real time, there is a full 4-hour version of this available over on my website. So I have launched a brand new tutorial section where there are Patreon tutorials linked, as well as exclusive tutorials such as this one. So if you want to check out the full 4-hour version, then just head on over to my website. The link is in the description below and there's a card up above, and subscribe up over there and you can get access to this and all of the resources. So there's line art, there are pencil pressures, fur techniques, and also the full 4-hour video of this. As always, all of the materials used throughout this tutorial are listed in the description below with links of where you can find them on Amazon and Jackson's Art Supplies. So let's get straight into this eye tutorial. So the first thing that I've done is made sure that I've got an accurate outline, and I cannot stress it enough that this is the most important thing that you need to do before you actually start to put down any coloured pencil. So you need to make sure that all of the proportions are correct within the eye, all of your spots and the highlights and everything in the fur are in exactly the right place. So to get down an accurate outline, you can either freehand it if you're really confident in your freehand abilities. You can use a grid method just by placing a grid over your reference photo and then applying the grid to your drawing paper as well, or you can use a tracing method. Either method that you use is great as long as you get down an accurate outline first. So once we've got that accurate outline down, then I go around the eye. So I'm going around the outside of the eye, outside of the iris, getting the form of the eye in to begin with a dark sepia pencil. And to begin with, I'm just using light pressure, so I'm using a very light hand and just gently tracing over where that graphite was to outline the eye. Once I've got the general rough outline, I then go in with a harder pressure of the dark sepia pencil, apply a bit more pressure to the pencil to really get that line down and really darken up the outside of the eye there. Once that's down, then we go in and fill in the colour on the iris. So the colours on the iris are quite simple. I used a limited palette for this as well. So the colours that I've laid down are the buff titanium from the Cavendish Luminance, some light yellow ochre polychromos, a bit of nougat, bista, and burnt ochre as well. That's for the yellow part around the outside, and I've just gently gone from the lightest colour, so that's the buff titanium, and then gradually built up to my darkest colour. So I've gradually built up to the bista and the nougat colours. And I've just applied the darker colours in the areas where there are some shadow. I've also added a few little details within the eye, so you can see that there's a few dark brown lines and stuff floating around on the bottom half of the eye. And I've just gone in with a bista pencil and then lightly gone over with the dark sepia to darken them up where necessary. The green part of the eye is made up of 2 green colours, so for that I've used earth green from the Polychromos, and I've also used the moss green from the Cavendish Luminance. And again, I've worked the lightest colour, so the earth green. I've just layered that very, very lightly, just gone over with a couple of layers, and then layered over with the moss green where you've got some of those more saturated sort of contrasty areas. So you can see I've got some really dark green lines within the eye there. That's where I've added a little bit of the moss green. Just around the pupil, I've also added a little hue of brown and orange, so I've just gone in with the burnt ochre pencils, a bista pencil, just to add a little halo around the pupil there. So for the highlight, what I've done is outlined it with the shadows and everything with my dark sepia pencil. I've got the initial shape of the highlight correct before I've gone in and added any details. And then with a really sharp dark sepia pencil, what I've done is added a few of the reflected eyelashes. So you can see on the left hand side of the highlight there are some prominent eyelashes, just 2 eyelashes that overlap and make a sort of Y shape. So I've added those in with a really sharp dark sepia pencil. I've also added in a few other details and a few shadows around the highlight, again with the same dark sepia pencil, just using light pressure to begin with to try and get the shape of everything correct. And then once I'm happy with the shape of that, then I've gone in with a heavier hand and a few more layers with the dark sepia to really darken it up in the places that it needs it. To add a little bit of colour to the highlight, I've gone over with a cold grey 1 polychromos pencil, and then I've touched in a little bit of Delft Blue polychromos pencil as well, so you can mainly see that on the right hand side of the highlight where the highlight overlaps the pupil. So what I've done is just burnished everything with the Caran d'Ache Luminance white pencil, just hyped down the saturation within the highlight and the whole of the eye as well, just smoothed everything out, just burnished everything into the tooth of the paper, and then what I've done is just glazed a few colours over the top. So glazed some more orange, so that burnt ochre, glazed a little bit of the light yellow ochre over there as well, just to add a little bit more of a rich colour to certain areas where it needed it according to the reference photo. So once I had completed the actual iris and the whole of the eye, I then moved on to the fur. And to do the fur, again, I used a limited palette. So throughout this tutorial, all I used were 12 coloured pencils, one of them being white, so I can't really see that you can class that as a colour pencil. But I used 12 pencils in total for this. So for the fur, what I did is studied my reference photo. I looked at the direction that all of that fur was going in, so I looked at the individual hairs that I could see, which way they were laying over one another. I got that in my mind before I went in with any colours. Once I'd got that in my mind, I then started to lay down my lightest colours, so my base layers, and the colour that I used for this was the warm grey 1 polychromos pencil. So what I did with this is just used a shading method, so I held my pencil quite far back towards the end. That helps you limit the pressure that you apply through your pencil, so I held it quite far back, I held it really loosely. I just let the pencil touch the paper and then gently move the pencil back and forth in the direction that fur is going in. So again, if you head on over to my website, you will see the technique demonstrated in a separate video over there for you. Once I'd got down my first layer of the warm grey 1, I then went in with a cold grey 1 and also a buff titanium and just picked out some of the lighter, warmer areas with the buff titanium and also some of the colder areas with the cold grey 1. And I just put them down in the same method, so I used a shading method, just light pressure back and forth with my pencil, just adding in those different toned areas. Once I was happy with where those toned areas were, I then decided to go in and map out all of the spots and all of the individual little dark markings that you can see within the leopard's fur. So for that, what I initially did was took a Nougat Polychromos pencil, so a light brown pencil, and I just mapped out very, very lightly where all of those spots were. So I used the same method as I did for my base layers. I used a shading method, just going back and forth very, very lightly, and just mapped out the shapes of the spots until I was happy with the placement of them. Using light pressure and layering in this manner means that you are more easily able to erase something if you make a mistake. So if you was to perhaps put down a spot in the wrong shape or in the wrong area, then you could just go in and lightly erase that and just remove a layer of colour. You wouldn't be able to do that if you went in with a really hard pressure to begin with. You'd find it really, really difficult to be able to lift the colour to a point that you won't see your mistake anymore. So by going in with light pressure and mapping everything out in this manner, it enables you to make less mistakes because you can erase your mistakes if you make them, and also you're not using that hard pressure and damaging the tooth of the paper. So just using light pressure will stop you making those mistakes, especially if you come to erase something that you've put down with hard pressure. You can often end up smudging something and then just ruining your whole piece. So going in with light layers and mapping everything out with a lighter colour pencil first will stop you making mistakes later on. So I like to map out all of the shapes with the Nougat coloured pencil. So again, a light brown colour pencil, just gently mapping out everything. Once I'm happy with the placement and the shapes and everything, then I decide to go in with my dark pencil. So for this, again, I use the dark sepia pencil. And first of all, I layer down a light layer of the dark sepia, just again to make sure that I'm happy with the placement of everything. And then I go in with a harder pressure. And to blend everything out, so you want to make sure that all of your spots and all of your fur is all nicely blended out. You don't want any harsh lines because you don't tend to find harsh lines on a subject like this, you want to make sure that you use small lines going into the rest of the fur. So if you look at the spot that I've done, the largest one above the eye, you can see that I've brought some of the fur strokes into the right hand side of the fur. We've got that slight orange patch, and I've also done it again on the left hand side, so the topmost area you can see where I've just added small fur strokes blending into the fur. And I've blended those fur strokes by using the dark sepia pencil very lightly, and I've also gone over with the nougat pencil as well, and I've just used very light pressure, making fur strokes with my pencil to blend everything out. On top of the dark areas within the spots, I decided to add a little bit of Delft blue, and I added this because it gives the area a little bit more dimension. It makes everything a little bit more darker as well, so if you was to layer brown and blue you get a really nice black tone, so it just adds an extra dimension to that dark area, gives everything a little bit more depth and warmth, and just gives everything a little bit more of a body. So we added the Delft blue over. I mainly added this in areas where the spots were darker. So again, if you look towards the right hand side of the leopard's face, you've got some really dark spots. In the left hand side, the spots are more of a brown colour, and I've just concentrated less strokes, less dark sepia pencil on that left hand side than the right hand side. The right hand side is where I've really gone in with hard pressure, multiple layers of the dark sepia, added a bit more of that Delft blue to try and really darken them up. I applied this whole method of putting down the base layers, so the warm grey one, the buff titanium and the cold grey one, just mapping out all of my warm and cool areas, then going over with the nougat pencil to map out those spots. I've just done that over the entire piece until I was happy with how it was looking. You can see that I've worked in separate sections as well. I just find this easier to manage everything. You might like to create the whole piece, whereas I just like to work in small sections to just find it easier to manage everything like that. But I've applied the same technique of the base layers, then mapping everything out, and then going in and finalising everything with my darker colours. Applied that technique and that way of working across the whole of this portrait. So what's really important with this as well is that you make the rest of the fur look realistic, so not just your spots. You want to make sure that the whole of the fur looks realistic. You want to pay all of your attention to the whole piece, not just particular parts of the piece. So a lot of people might be tempted to just pay a lot of attention to the spotted areas, whereas you really need to make sure that you pay the whole attention to the whole piece. You want to give each section of your portrait the same amount of time as you have other sections. You also want to make sure that all of your fur strokes are going in the same direction when you're drawing the fur. If you have some fur strokes which are going off in an odd direction, it can make everything look a little bit unnatural, whereas if you're striving for realism, obviously looking realistic is key, so you want to make sure that all of your fur strokes and all of your furs going in the same direction, and that you pay attention to your reference photo to get that correct. So that's pretty much it for this leopard's eye tutorial. Just a few short techniques and tips on how you can render realistic fur and a realistic looking eye. If you liked this video, then give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below of any future tutorials that you would like to see me create. I'm always interested to see what you guys would like to see on this channel. It would be great if you guys could share this video with your friends and get more people across to the channel and involved with all of the tutorials as well. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and tick that bell icon to be notified of all of my future videos as soon as they're released, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye!